The bank statement showed exactly $47,982 missing from my retirement account, money I'd saved through 42 years of meticulously mapping the nation's watersheds. My hands, spotted with age but still steady enough to trace contour lines, trembled as I held the paper. There, on each withdrawal slip, was my son-in-law Dwight's signature, dated every third Thursday when he'd told Claudia he was taking me to my specialist appointments. Appointments that, I realised with a sickening clarity, had never existed. What I didn't understand yet was why these withdrawals started exactly 1 week after I'd signed the papers, transferring $325,000, the entire proceeds from selling my home of 40 years, into their escrow account for the house we were supposed to share. I've spent my life reading maps, creating them, correcting them, understanding the stories they tell about the places they represent. But somewhere along the way, I lost the ability to read the topography of my own family, to see the eroding boundaries and shifting territories of trust. It wasn't always this way. When Nathaniel was alive, our modest ranch house in Missouri was the center of our world. He built furniture in the garage while I drafted maps in the study, our parallel lives of creation intersecting each evening over dinner, where we'd discuss everything from riparian rights to river resin finishes. The smell of freshly cut pine would cling to his flannel shirts, mingling with the distinct odor of the technical pens I used for my precise line work. Our hands would meet across the kitchen table, his rough with sawdust, mine stained with ink, a tactile reminder of our different but complementary paths. After Claudia left for college, we converted her bedroom into a proper workroom for me. I spread my larger topographical studies across the walls, creating a geographic tapestry of the American landscape I'd helped document. Nathaniel would stand in the doorway sometimes, coffee mug in hand, watching me work with the kind of quiet pride that needs no verbal expression. "You're making history," he'd say occasionally, one contour line at a time. When the arthritis began to gnaw my fingers in my late 60s, he modified my tools with custom grips sanded to fit my changing hands. We adapted. We always had. His death at 74 from a sudden stroke left a continent-sized void in my life. I remember standing in our kitchen the morning after the funeral, a room suddenly too large, too empty. The rhythms of our shared life, his heavy footsteps on the porch, the scrape of his chair at breakfast, the low hum he made when reading, all gone, leaving an echoing silence that no single person could fill. Claudia drove down from Chicago and stayed for 3 weeks. She handled the paperwork, the phone calls, the endless details that death demands. "I've got you, Mum," she'd say, bringing me tea I didn't drink, making sure I ate at least once daily. Her presence was a comfort, her competence a temporary shelter from the storm of grief. When she returned to her accounting job, the reality of widowhood settled over me like a heavy fog. The house needed maintenance I couldn't physically perform. The property taxes increased again. My Social Security check of $1,642 and Nathaniel's modest pension barely covered the basics after my medication costs. I found myself calculating and recalculating our finances with the same precision I once applied to watershed elevations. The numbers never improved, no matter how I adjusted the variables. 6 months after Nathaniel's passing, Claudia called with what seemed like providence. "Mum, we're thinking of buying a bigger house," she said, her voice bright with excitement. "One with an in-law suite. You could sell your place and move in with us. Aidan would love having you closer, and you wouldn't have to worry about home repairs or being alone." It made sense. Logical, practical sense. The kind of sense that appealed to my cartographer's mind. I could sell my home in a strong market, contribute to their new house purchase, and secure my future with family. "We'd put your name on the deed, of course," Claudia assured me. "It would be your home, too." 3 months later, I watched as the moving company packed up 40 years of memories. Each box they sealed felt like closing a chapter. Nathaniel's tools, my drafting table, the cedar chest he'd built for our 10th anniversary. I kept repeating to myself that I wasn't losing these things, just relocating them, changing their coordinates on the map of my life. The in-law suite they'd designed was pleasant enough. A bedroom, small sitting area, compact bathroom, and a kitchenette. Your own apartment, Dwight called it, though it was barely 600 square feet. Still, the windows faced east, allowing morning light to flood in, and there was a small patio where I could sit and watch the seasons change. I arranged my remaining possessions carefully, creating a miniature version of the home I had left behind. In those early months, there was a honeymoon period of sorts. Dwight would knock on my door with coffee, asking about my mapping career, seemingly fascinated by stories of my time at the US Geological Survey. "Remarkable," he'd say, leaning forward. "A woman in that field, in those days." I'd tell him about the Colorado River Basin water rights maps I'd drafted in 1972, or how my team's topographical surveys were still being used by the Department of the Interior. He'd nod appreciatively, occasionally taking notes as if my experiences were valuable historical records. Claudia seemed happy having me there, popping in during her lunch breaks, bringing me small treats from her favourite bakery downtown. Aidan, 11 then, would do his homework at my small table, claiming the light was better in Grandma's place than anywhere else in the house. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the terrain shifted. It started with Dwight's terms of endearment. "Mother Hen," he began calling me. Initially it seemed affectionate, even a little sweet, but the context changed over time, the tone cooling like autumn slipping into winter. "Mother Hen has these remarkable ideas about cabinet heights," he told the kitchen renovation contractor, not quite looking at me. "From the Carter administration, I think." I was standing right there, keys to my car in hand, having driven 40 minutes to bring them the vintage copper cookware they'd mentioned wanting. The contractor, younger than Aidan, had smiled indulgently like I was a child who'd drawn on the walls. "We'll stick with standard," he'd told Dwight as if I couldn't hear. "Better for resale anyway." That night I wrote in my journal, "The same knowledge that made me interesting now makes me inconvenient." I've kept journals since 1958, one for each year, precisely documented and dated. Some habits from my mapping days never leave you. The dismissals accumulated like sediment, gradually altering the landscape between us. My suggestions about energy-efficient window treatments were met with patronising smiles. My concerns about Aidan's excessive screen time were waved away as outdated thinking. My observations about a leak in the garage roof were ignored until water damaged Dwight's golf clubs, at which point it became an emergency. "We've got it handled, Mum," Claudia would say, distracted by her work laptop or phone. "You don't need to worry about these things." But I did worry, because I was contributing to the mortgage each month from my pension because I'd invested my home equity in this place, because I'd been maintaining properties since before Claudia was born. The most telling moments happened in my absence. Once, returning early from a doctor's appointment, I overheard Dwight in the kitchen with his brother. "It's like having a third child sometimes," he was saying, voice low but clear. "Everything needs to be explained. Everything needs to be managed. And the opinions, God, the endless opinions about how things should be done." His brother had laughed. "That's why we put Mom in Sunny Pines. Best decision ever. No more daily phone calls about leaky faucets or noisy neighbours." "Claudia's not there yet," Dwight had replied. "Still feeling guilty about her dad, I think. But I'm working on her. Another year, maybe." I'd stood frozen in the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Another year for what? To move me to a facility? To remove me from the house I'd helped purchase? Instead of confronting him, I'd quietly retreated to my suite, closed the door, and sat at my small desk, hands pressed flat against its surface to stop their trembling. That night, I pulled out my current journal and made an entry that would prove prophetic. Begin mapping alternate routes, terrain becoming unstable. The early warning signs multiplied after that. My mail, which had always been placed in a basket on my kitchenette counter, began arriving already opened. Just making sure it's not junk, Claudia explained when I questioned this. Saving you the trouble. Dwight started accompanying me to medical appointments, insisting on speaking to my doctors directly. Just keeping everyone on the same page, he'd say. It's easy for details to get confused at your age. My age, 78, had apparently transformed me from a professional woman who'd corrected Army Corps of Engineers calculations to someone who couldn't reliably report my own blood pressure readings. The most disturbing pattern emerged around my financial documents. Bank statements that should have arrived monthly began appearing sporadically. When I called the bank to inquire, I was told they'd been sent to my primary residence address as requested, meaning the main house mailbox, not my suite. We updated your information based on the form submitted last month, the customer service representative told me. Signed by you and your son-in-law as the authorized person on your account. I had signed no such form. If this story resonated with your soul, click subscribe and let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. I'm truly curious to know where you're tuning in from. That evening, I waited until Claudia and Dwight had gone to bed before carefully searching the home office they rarely used. The filing cabinet yielded nothing unusual, nor did the desk drawers. I was about to leave when I noticed the password-protected computer had been left logged in. Something, intuition, perhaps, or simple desperation, made me open the financial folder on the desktop. What I found made my blood run cold. But what I didn't realize then was why they had been timing my medications so carefully, or why Dwight had started casually mentioning memory care facilities in our conversations. The computer screen cast a harsh blue glow across the dark office as I stared at the PDF open before me. It was a bank statement from my retirement account, an account I hadn't been able to access online since Dwight had helped me reset my banking passwords 3 months earlier. The balance was $47,382, lower than it should have been. With trembling fingers, I scrolled through the transaction history. 8 separate withdrawals, each for $5,997.5, made every third Thursday for the past 8 months. Each withdrawal form bore my signature, or what appeared to be my signature, but with the slight irregularities of a careful forgery. And beside it, on the authorized representative line, was Dwight's distinctive scrawl. My throat constricted, as if someone had placed their hands around it. The room seemed to tilt slightly, and I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. My heart fluttered in my chest, a sensation my doctor had warned could precede another atrial fibrillation episode. I closed my eyes and forced myself to take deep, measured breaths. When I opened them again, I clicked through other files in the folder, methodical despite my racing thoughts. A document titled Sunny Pines Financial Arrangements revealed a $45,000 deposit made last month for something called a Primrose Memory Care Suite, with a projected move-in date 3 weeks from today. They'd been planning to move me to a memory care facility without even discussing it with me. Another file contained scans of my medical records, including notes from appointments I'd never had, documenting increasing confusion and difficulty managing daily activities. A third contained forms transferring power of attorney for healthcare and finances to Claudia, forms with my signature that I had never seen, let alone signed. The final document felt like a physical blow. It was a revised deed for the house, removing my name entirely, with a notation referencing a gift letter, reclassifying my $325,000 contribution as a family gift rather than an ownership investment. They were erasing me, not just from the home I'd helped purchase, but from my own life, rewriting my financial history, my medical status, my very autonomy. I sat in perfect stillness. The kind of stillness I'd maintained in remote field sites when taking precise measurements that couldn't afford the slightest tremor. But inside, something was shifting. Tectonic plates of understanding grinding against each other, creating a new landscape. With meticulous care, I used Dwight's laptop to email myself copies of every incriminating document, then restored the screen exactly as I'd found it. I returned to my suite, closed the door, and sat at my small desk until dawn broke through the eastern windows. I didn't cry. The betrayal had moved beyond tears into something colder, more fundamental. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about my existence being systematically dismantled by the people I'd trusted most. The next morning, I observed Claudia and Dwight with new eyes. How had I missed the careful way they exchanged glances when I entered a room? The slight hesitation before answering my questions? The exaggerated patience in their tones, as if speaking to someone who might not fully comprehend? Dwight placed my morning pills beside my coffee cup with the casual comment, "These help keep everything running smoothly, don't they, mother hen?" I looked at the small white tablet among my regular medications, something I didn't recognize. How long had they been giving me medication I hadn't prescribed? "What's this one?" I asked, picking it up. "Just the memory supplement Dr. Patel recommended," he replied smoothly. "You've been taking it for months now, remember?" I didn't remember because it had never happened. Dr. Patel had prescribed no such thing. "Of course," I murmured, and when his back was turned, I slipped the tablet into my pocket instead of my mouth. That afternoon, while Claudia was at work and Dwight was on a conference call, I drove myself to the pharmacy and asked them to identify the pill. The pharmacist examined it carefully. "This is a mild sedative," she said, "usually prescribed for anxiety or insomnia. A sedative that could easily be mistaken for confusion or cognitive decline if given to someone my age during the day." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Over the next week, I documented everything. I photographed my legitimate medications and compared them to what I was being given. I recorded conversations on my phone, a device they'd simplified for my benefit, but hadn't realized still had recording capabilities. I kept detailed notes of every inconsistency, every half-truth, every dismissal. The picture that emerged was more calculated than I had initially feared. This wasn't just opportunistic financial exploitation. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign to have me declared incompetent, institutionalized, and removed from both the property and my own resources. The most devastating discovery came from Aidan, who innocently mentioned, "Dad says once Grandma moves to her new place, I can have the whole downstairs for my gaming setup. He's already ordered the equipment." "Did he mention when this might happen?" I asked, keeping my voice casual as we worked together on his science project. "After spring break," he replied. "He said it's all arranged, but we're not supposed to talk about it because you might get confused or upset." Spring break was 2 weeks away. The betrayal went beyond Dwight. In the hall closet, I found a brochure for Sunny Pines with Claudia's handwriting on it, noting questions about visiting hours and personal item restrictions. My own daughter, who I'd nursed through chickenpox and coached through her first heartbreak, was complicit in this plans to discard me. That night, alone in my suite, I stood before the mirror and really looked at myself for the first time in months. The woman staring back wasn't confused or declining. Her eyes were clear, her stance upright despite the arthritic hip that sometimes betrayed her. She had mapped wilderness, corrected government surveys, raised a child, buried a husband, and survived. I squared my shoulders, feeling something shift within me. Not just emotion, but resolution. The careful, accommodating woman who had swallowed indignities to keep peace was receding, revealing someone steelier, more determined. The next morning, I called my old colleague, Josephine Porter. We'd worked together at USGS for 27 years, and though arthritis had gnarled her hands too badly for detailed cartography work, her mind remained sharp as the instruments we once used. "Joe," I said when she answered, "remember that time in '79 when the department tried to credit your Appalachian watershed map to Richardson because they didn't believe a woman could have created something that comprehensive?" She cackled. "I'm insulted you think I could forget. I went over their heads so fast it gave them nosebleeds. I need some of that spine now. I told her, and explained my situation, keeping my voice low though I was alone in my suite. Josephine listened without interruption, then said, "Vera, honey, you call Madeline Chen right now." Madeline Chen had been our department's legal liaison before she left to start her own practice, specialising in elder law. I'd attended her retirement party in 2010, but hadn't spoken to her since. "She'll remember you," Josephine assured me. "Nobody forgets the woman who corrected the Army Corps of Engineers to their faces about the Mississippi tributaries." 3 hours later, I was sitting in Madeline's office, my evidence spread before her. She examined each document with the focus of someone used to working with precise measurements. "This is elder abuse, Vera," she said finally, removing her silver-framed glasses. "Financial exploitation, medication tampering, fraudulent documentation, and that's just what we can prove immediately." "What are my options?" I asked, hands folded calmly in my lap, though my heart was racing. "Multiple," she replied, putting her glasses back on. "We can file for an emergency injunction to prevent any property transactions. We can report the financial exploitation to Adult Protective Services. We can contest the fraudulent power of attorney." She looked at me over her glasses. "But first we need to ensure your immediate safety." "I'm not leaving my home," I said firmly. "It may not be safe to stay given the medication tampering," she countered. "They're building a case for your incompetence, Vera. Each day you're there gives them more opportunity." I considered this, weighing the risks with the same careful deliberation I once applied to mapping unstable terrains. "What if I appear to play into their hands?" I asked slowly. "What if I seem to be exactly what they expect? A declining elderly woman, confused but compliant?" Madeline's eyebrows rose. "A strategic retreat while we prepare the counter-offensive?" I nodded. "They've underestimated me at every turn. Let them continue to do so while we gather what we need." For the next 10 days, I became the embodiment of their expectations. I asked repetitive questions. I forgot simple tasks. I appeared increasingly dependent on their guidance. Each night, I flushed the sedatives and documented every interaction, every conversation, every plan they revealed, thinking I wouldn't remember or understand. Madeline worked quickly, filing for temporary conservatorship based on the evidence of financial exploitation. She submitted my medical records, my real ones, obtained directly from my doctors, showing no cognitive impairment. She prepared affidavits from Josephine and 2 other former colleagues testifying to my continued mental acuity. Most crucially, she filed an emergency injunction preventing any property transactions or changes to the deed without court approval. While legally securing my position, I mapped my strategic response. I transferred my remaining funds to a new account at a different bank. I arranged for my important documents and irreplaceable possessions to be temporarily stored with Josephine. I installed a small camera in my suite that uploaded footage to a secure cloud account. I also began building alliances. I reached out to our next-door neighbour, Eleanor Voss, a retired judge who had always treated me with respect. Without revealing everything, I shared enough of my concerns that she agreed to be an emergency contact. I reconnected with my niece in Springfield, who offered her guest room if needed. I even befriended the pharmacy technician who had identified the sedative, who then began documenting the prescriptions Dwight had been filling in my name. My strategy was not merely defensive. Like any good cartographer, I wasn't just mapping the territory, I was preparing to redraw the boundaries. The plan crystallized when I overheard Dwight on the phone with Sunny Pines, confirming my check-in date for the following Monday. The same day, they had scheduled closing on a home equity line of credit that would extract another $150,000 from the property. "We'll bring her in the morning," he said. "She's been increasingly confused lately, so we may need some extra help with the transition. But she's generally compliant, especially after her morning medication." That evening at dinner, I played my role perfectly, appearing slightly disoriented, asking repeated questions about the date, seeming grateful for their patience. I mentioned feeling especially tired and retired to my suite early, declining Aidan's invitation to help with his homework. "Grandma needs her rest," Dwight told him with a meaningful glance at Claudia. She hasn't been sleeping well lately. In the privacy of my suite, I sent the final documentation to Madeline, including recordings of that day's conversations. Her response was immediate. Everything is in place. Are you certain you want to proceed tomorrow rather than waiting for the court date next week? Absolutely, I replied. They plan to institutionalize me on Monday. We move tomorrow. But what they never expected was that I had recordings of every conversation for the past 2 weeks. And what they said about me when they thought I wasn't listening would change everything, especially when played in front of the very people they'd been cultivating as witnesses to my decline. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of crystalline Midwest day that sharpens every edge and clarifies every shadow. Appropriate weather, I thought, for bringing hidden things to light. I dressed with particular care. A tailored navy pantsuit I'd worn to professional conferences. A silver pin shaped like the Missouri River that Nathaniel had given me on our 25th anniversary. Practical but polished low heels. I applied light makeup and arranged my silver hair neatly. The woman in the mirror looked composed, dignified, and unmistakably competent. By the time I emerged from my suite, the house was already busy. Dwight had arranged what he called a family brunch. But what I now understood was a strategic gathering of witnesses to my supposed decline. Present were his brother and sister-in-law, 2 couples from their social circle, and their family doctor, Dr. Matthews, not my regular physician, but someone Dwight played golf with regularly. "Mother hen," Dwight exclaimed with exaggerated brightness when I appeared. "You're up and dressed already. We were just about to check on you." "I've been up since 6, I replied calmly. I had preparations to make. Something in my tone made his smile falter momentarily, but he recovered quickly. "Well, you look lovely. Come sit down. Claudia's made your favorite blueberry pancakes." The table was set elaborately, mimicking the brunches I used to host when I had my own home. Claudia moved about the kitchen with nervous energy, avoiding my eyes. Aidan sat sullenly at the far end of the table, absorbed in his phone until Dwight sharply told him to put it away. "We have guests, son. Let's be present." I took my designated seat between Dr. Matthews and Dwight's sister-in-law, Sharon. Both greeted me with the slightly over-loud, over-enunciated speech people often use with those they perceive as impaired. "How are you feeling today, Vera?" Sharon asked, patting my hand. "Remarkably clear-headed," I replied in a normal tone. "And your hearing seems perfectly intact, so perhaps we can converse at a standard volume." Sharon blinked, startled, and Dr. Matthews gave me a clinical, assessing look. Dwight quickly intervened. "Mum's having one of her good days, aren't you, Mother Hen? Sometimes the mornings are better." "Indeed," I agreed pleasantly. "Mornings are excellent for seeing things as they truly are." As brunch progressed, I observed the careful choreography around me. Dwight subtly redirected conversation whenever I began speaking substantively. Claudia hovered anxiously, refilling coffee cups and offering more food. The guests exchanged occasional glances when I spoke, clearly having been primed to notice any confusion or inappropriate comments. I waited until everyone had been served, and the initial flurry of conversation had settled before speaking. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming today," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the table. "It's important to have witnesses at significant moments. Don't you agree, Dwight?" He froze with his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Witnesses? It's just a casual brunch, Mother Hen." "Is it?" I set my napkin beside my plate and folded my hands on the table. "Or is it a carefully orchestrated demonstration of my supposed cognitive decline before I'm taken to Sunny Pines Memory Care on Monday morning?" A sudden, complete silence fell over the table. Claudia dropped a serving spoon with a clatter. "Mum," she said weakly, "you're confused again. Nobody's taking you anywhere." "That's interesting," I replied, retrieving my phone from my jacket pocket. "Because I have a recording of Dwight confirming my check-in appointment for Monday at 9 a.m. I pressed play, and Dwight's voice filled the room, discussing my transition to the facility and how my increased confusion would make it easier to manage me. Colour drained from his face as his own words exposed him. You've been recording private conversations? That's invasion of privacy. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. In Missouri, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation, and Mrs. Hargrove clearly consented to record her own interactions. Every head turned to see Madeleine Chen standing there, elegant in a charcoal suit, leather portfolio in hand. Behind her stood Eleanor Voss, our neighbour, and Officer Rivera from the County Elder Services Unit. "What is this?" Dwight demanded, standing so abruptly his chair nearly toppled. "Who are these people? Claudia, did you invite them?" Claudia looked as shocked as he did. "No, I invited them," I said calmly. "As I mentioned, witnesses are important. Madeleine, would you care to explain?" Madeleine stepped forward. "I'm Madeleine Chen, Mrs. Hargrove's attorney. I'm here to formally serve you both with notice of the emergency injunction granted yesterday by Judge Harmon, preventing any property transactions related to this house, any changes to Mrs. Hargrove's living situation without court approval, and any further access to Mrs. Hargrove's financial accounts." She handed the documents to a stunned Dwight, who took them reflexively. "Additionally," she continued, "Officer Rivera is here to investigate potential charges of elder abuse, specifically financial exploitation, medication tampering, and attempted involuntary confinement." The guests at the table began murmuring, looks of confusion and alarm spreading. "This is ridiculous," Dwight sputtered. "Vera is clearly not well. She's been exhibiting signs of dementia for months. Tell them, Dr. Matthews." The doctor shifted uncomfortably. "I've only seen Mrs. Hargrove socially, not professionally. I couldn't make that determination without proper examination." "But you said," Dwight began, then stopped himself. "Said what?" Officer Rivera asked, notebook in hand. "Please continue, Mr. Lewis." Dwight's composure cracked further. "This is a family matter. All of you need to leave right now." He turned to the guests. "I'm sorry, but brunch is over. We have a situation with my mother-in-law that requires immediate attention." "Actually," Eleanor Voss spoke up, her voice carrying the quiet authority of her years on the bench, "I believe your immediate attention is required for these legal documents. As a retired judge, I'd strongly advise you to read them carefully before taking any action." Aidan, who had been watching with wide eyes, suddenly stood. "Dad, what's happening? Why is Grandma saying you're taking her to a home?" The naked distress in his voice seemed to penetrate Claudia's shock. She moved to her son's side, putting an arm around him. "Aidan, this is complicated adult business. Maybe you should—" "No," I interrupted firmly. "He deserves to know. He's old enough to understand betrayal." I turned to my grandson. "Aidan, your father and mother have been planning to place me in a memory care facility against my will while taking control of my finances and removing my name from this house, the house I paid 1/3 of the cost to purchase." "That's not true," Dwight shouted. "Claudia, tell her it's not true." All eyes turned to my daughter, who stood frozen, one arm still around Aidan. I could see the internal struggle play across her face, the conflict between the lies she'd accepted and the truth now exposed. "We were trying to help," she whispered finally. "You were getting confused. Dad said—" "Your father said many things that weren't true," I said gently. "And I have never been confused, Claudia. The only confusion was what you created by giving me medication I didn't need." I turned to Officer Rivera. "In the medicine cabinet in the main bathroom, third shelf, you'll find a bottle labelled Memory Support Supplement. It contains a sedative that was being administered to me without my knowledge or consent." The officer looked to Madeleine, who nodded. "We have documentation of this allegation, including identification of the medication by a licensed pharmacist." As Officer Rivera left to investigate, Dr. Matthews stood awkwardly. "I think I should remove myself from this situation. I was invited under apparently false pretenses." "Actually, Doctor," Madeleine said smoothly, "we'd appreciate if you'd stay as a medical witness, given the allegations of medication tampering." The other guests began making uncomfortable noises about leaving, but Eleanor smoothly intercepted them. As potential witnesses to a criminal investigation, we'd ask that you remain until Officer Rivera has had a chance to speak with you. The careful structure Dwight had built was collapsing around him. His face flushed deep red as he turned on me. You planned this, he hissed. You manipulated everyone. No, Dwight, I replied steadily. I simply created an accurate map of what was happening. The territory was already there. I just documented it truthfully, Officer Rivera returned with the pill bottle. We'll need to have this analysed, she said, placing it in an evidence bag. Dwight's control finally shattered completely. This is insane. We were trying to protect her from herself. She can't manage alone anymore. The house was too much for her. Her finances were a mess. We were doing her a favour by taking over. A $325,000 favour? Madeline asked coldly. Plus the nearly $48,000 you've withdrawn from her retirement account over the past 8 months, Sharon gasped audibly. Dr. Matthews looked physically ill. Dwight? Claudia's voice was small, confused. You said that money was going into a special account for Mom's future care. The look he gave her was venomous. Don't act like you didn't know. Who do you think signed as witness on half those withdrawal forms? The betrayal within the betrayal hung in the air, as Claudia realised she too had been manipulated. I think we've established enough for today, Madeline said briskly. Mrs. Hargrove will be temporarily relocating while the investigation proceeds. Officer Rivera has some questions for both of you, and I'd suggest you obtain legal counsel immediately. Relocating? This is my home, I said firmly. Legally, yes, Madeline agreed. But given the medication tampering, we feel it's safer if you stay elsewhere briefly. She can stay with me, Eleanor offered. My guest room is quite comfortable, and I'm right next door. Aidan suddenly broke away from his mother and came to stand beside me. I'm going with Grandma, he announced, his young face set in an expression remarkably similar to the one I'd seen in my mirror that morning. Don't be ridiculous, Dwight snapped. You're staying here. No, I'm not, Aidan replied, his voice breaking slightly but determined. I don't want to stay with people who lie about giving medicine to make someone seem sick when they're not. I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Aidan, I appreciate your support more than you know, but this is a temporary situation that the adults need to resolve. I'll be right next door, and you can visit any time. Promise? He asked, looking suddenly younger than his 13 years. I promise, I assured him. I've never mapped a territory I couldn't find my way back to. Within 2 hours, I was settled in Eleanor's guest room with an overnight bag and my most essential papers. The legal machinery Madeline had set in motion continued to operate, statements taken, evidence documented, arrangements made for a full forensic financial investigation. Dwight and Claudia were served with formal notifications preventing them from accessing any of my accounts, altering the property in any way, or attempting to contact me, except through legal representatives. Claudia called 3 times, leaving increasingly distraught messages that Madeline screened for me. I didn't know, she kept saying. Mom, you have to believe me. I didn't know about the money or the medication. I thought we were helping you. Perhaps she was telling the truth. Perhaps not. The topography of trust, once eroded, is difficult to restore to its original contours. I spent that evening sitting on Eleanor's back porch watching the same sunset visible from my own patio, just 1 property away. The physical distance was minimal, but the emotional and legal landscape had transformed completely. You're remarkably calm, Eleanor observed, bringing me a cup of tea. I spent 42 years documenting landscapes, I replied. Learning to see what's actually there, not what others claim is there. It served me well. The legal proceedings unfolded over the following weeks with a precision that would have satisfied my cartographer's soul. The forensic financial investigation revealed even more than I'd discovered. Dwight had been systematically draining not just my accounts but household funds as well, fueling stock market speculations that had uniformly failed. Claudia, it emerged, had been a partial victim herself, kept ignorant of the full financial picture while being manipulated into supporting Dwight's narrative about my declining health. She had signed some documents, yes, but others bore clear forgeries of her signature, another betrayal within the larger one. Faced with overwhelming evidence and potential criminal charges, Dwight agreed to a settlement that required the house to be sold, my full contribution plus interest returned to me, and all stolen funds repaid from his portion of the proceeds. He and Claudia separated, their marriage another casualty of his deceptions. 3 months later, I stood in the bright kitchen of my new condominium, a one-level unit in a secure building with a view of the park. I'd purchased it outright with my recovered funds, my name the only one on the deed. The space was smaller than my old house with Nathaniel, but larger than the in-law suite, and completely mine. The walls held selected maps from my career: the Colorado River Basin Water Rights Survey, the corrected Chesapeake Bay watershed boundaries, the Mississippi tributaries chart that had earned me both criticism and eventual acclaim. Nathaniel's cedar chest sat at the foot of my bed, filled with journals documenting a life's journey through carefully observed terrain. Aidan visits every Wednesday and alternate weekends, eager to learn more about mapping and increasingly interested in environmental geography. Claudia and I meet for coffee monthly, rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. The trust will never be what it was, but neither is it completely destroyed. We are creating a new map of our relationship with clearer boundaries and more honest landmarks. Josephine and I have lunch weekly, 2 cartographers comparing notes on the territories of aging. Madeline calls periodically to check on me, having become both attorney and friend. Eleanor and I walk in the park on fair weather mornings, discussing books and local politics. Dwight lives in another state now, having relocated after finding himself unwelcome in our community once the details of his actions became known. I wish him neither well nor ill. He is simply not on my map anymore. At 79, I am not who I was at 78. I am more vigilant, perhaps, more aware of how quickly trusted terrain can shift, but I am also more certain of my own ability to navigate whatever landscapes appear before me. I have reclaimed not just my financial security, but my identity as someone whose knowledge and experience have value, whose life cannot be rewritten by others for their convenience. Some would call what happened justice. Others might see it as revenge. I see it as cartography of the most fundamental kind, the accurate documentation of boundaries that must be respected for any map to be true. My name is Vera Hargrove. I spent my life making maps that others could trust. In the end, I had to map my own path back to solid ground. If you haven't subscribed yet, click the button now to join our community of women who refuse to be invisible. You'll find stories like this one every day, stories that remind us all that wisdom and patience can be more powerful than anger when seeking justice. Be sure to check out the next video on screen for another journey of transformation. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.